let's kick off this discussion with perhaps the most important question, because a lot of people know you from your first book, which was called The Trouble with Islam Today. What is the trouble with Islam today in your view?
In a word, Muslims. We are the trouble with Islam today. We have allowed tribal culture to colonize the faith of Islam. But the good news in saying this is that we are also the source of reform, meaning that we can literally draw inspiration from our own scripture, from the Quran, in order to reform our hearts, our spirits, and our beings. And one passage that has been profoundly inspirational for me is the one that states, believers, conduct yourselves with justice and bear true witness before God. And here is the revolutionary part, even if it be against yourselves, your parents, or your relatives. This is a call for moral courage. This is a call to stand up when others want you to sit down. Islam isn't some theory. Islam is a way of life, and it is we Muslims who define what that way of life is. And so if we are stopping one another from expressing our diversity, then the message we are sending to each other, not just to the rest of the world, to one another, is that this is Islam. I don't buy that. Tribal culture is not Islam, but we have made ourselves the problem with Islam today.
We'll come to tribal culture, but I would question the premise which says Islam is defined by what Muslims do. Because if that's the basis, then what is the point of a holy book? What is the point of a holy prophet? What is the point of scripture, revelation?
To guide.
But they're not the defining features of a religion.
It's
the tenets
the behavior.
Of the faith,
it's the behavior of Muslims that defines in every generation what Islam is.
So
I understand that there's
on that
actually
basis,
a story.
Christianity is defined by Christians.
Of course.
So I can condemn Christianity for something, say, George W. Bush has done.
You can condemn the way Christianity is being practiced, and if a Christian is practicing Christianity in the name of Christ, in a way that is violent, in a way that is intolerant, I don't believe that there is anything blasphemous about saying that there is trouble within Christianity.
You're not a fan of moderate Muslims. You think moderate Muslims, quote, are part of the problem, not the solution?
Correct. Basically, I make the case for being a reformist Muslim, not just a moderate one. And here's why. Moderate Muslims do denounce violence that is committed in the name of Islam, very much so, but they deny that religion plays any role in that violence. The very first thing you will hear from the mouth of a moderate, typically after an act of violence committed in the name of Islam, is, please don't misunderstand, Islam has nothing to do with this. But that's not true, because those who are committing the violence cite Islam as their inspiration. What reformist Muslims do,
let me finish. To define the religion.
What reformist Muslims do is that we acknowledge there is violence, but we also say that the way in which some people are using our religion is that they are inspired by religion to commit that violence. In other words, when moderate Muslims say that Islam has nothing to do with this, they are the ones, in my humble view, who are ceding the ground, who are handing over the ground of theological interpretation to those who already have malignant intentions. But these are the same kinds of people who have said things like Islam and the Quran in particular is just unequivocal, that if you kill a human being, it is like killing all of mankind. Not true. Actually, the verse itself, chapter 5, verse 32 reads, if you kill a human being, it is like killing all of mankind, unless you are killing that human being as punishment for violence or murder or other villainy in the land, okay? So I'm saying that moderate Muslims cannot simply sanitize what does exist in the Quran. We need to get real, we need to get honest, and we need to offer bold and competing reinterpretations of what is actually in the Quran, rather than putting periods and other punctuation marks that don't exist.
You seem to be suggesting that this is the best thing since sliced bread, right? We are always willing to engage. And when you talk about the lack of condemnation of terrorism, the Muslim Council of Britain, without any prompting from anywhere, were one of the first to condemn it. This is a specialist area. When I have a medical issue, or a legal issue, or a financial issue, I will go to the experts. We're talking about spirituality, we're talking about religion and faith, we're talking about the hereafter. And I wouldn't want to allow lay people to start reinterpreting
the experts. You're doing DIY Islam.
No, spirituality.
Please don't misunderstand me.
I do very much understand, and I've heard it over and over and over again. And I remember in Indonesia when this point was made to me, and a scholar, certified scholar sitting right next to me, said to the person making your point, sir, he said, if you're going to go as far as to compare spirituality to medicine or accounting, well, in medicine, there is a principle called first do no harm. You can actually sue a doctor for doing harm. Maybe we should be able to sue mullahs too for doing harm.
Why are you against expertise,
The
specialism?
Quran, you know, it's interesting because the reason I can embrace the Quran is that, 3 times as many verses in the Quran call on Muslims to think and rethink and analyze, as you pointed out, rather than submit blindly. So by that criterion, actually all of God's creatures, Muslims especially, are called upon to keep thinking. It's not about expertise. It's about remembering, sir, that you are not God and I am not God. And therefore, none of us can claim to have the, quote, right interpretation.
Would you get rid of all scholars, imams, mullahs, as you call them, anyone, get rid of all of it?
I would help equip a new generation of Muslims with the self-confidence to recognize that they are allowed to think for themselves.
No, we understand thinking for ourselves. I've been thinking for myself for 33 years. I didn't need anyone's permission. I'm asking about specifically coming up with laws, understanding verses of the Quran, understanding traditions of Islam, understanding what ethics, Islamic ethics are. How can every single person just make that up as they go along? Surely in every religion, in every society, in every field of life, you defer to experts, people with specialist knowledge,
well, again,
which you and I don't have.
Well, wait a minute. As we found out with the 2008 global economic meltdown, which was not predicted by the experts, experts often aren't experts, okay? So let's stop playing the power game, Mehdi. Let's stop playing on the terms of people who call themselves experts and who like to use their power as a cudgel, as a sledgehammer over everybody else.
Who are the people you know in your view? Who are the people you ask?
Who I ask?
Yeah.
If I'm thinking for myself, but I will tell you.
Everything.
Certainly.
Everything. You don't need any help in understanding the Quran, the tafsir, the interpretation, the history, the ethics, the context.
One of the most common questions that I get from young Muslims is about interfaith relationships. I'm a Muslim, I've fallen in love with a non-Muslim, is there any hope for us? And they usually say something along the lines of that my parents and their imam insist that Islam, stops interfaith marriage. Is that true? Rather than me giving them my personal interpretation, what I've come to realize is that they're actually not asking about themselves, they're asking about their parents. They need an argument that will convince their parents that love is borderless.
If you buy this argument that the mullahs are all bad, everyone thinks for themselves.
All bad. Come on.
A lot of them are bad.
Hyping that.
A lot of them are bad.
Don't be a typical journalist.
A lot of them are bad.
Don't do that.
A lot of them are bad. I read 2 of your books. They didn't come out very well.
Don't polarize.
A lot of them are bad. We think for ourselves. We don't allow them to monopolize power, end the power game, etc. My worry is, if I'm in Al-Qaeda, that's very appealing. I don't need to worry about classical law, scholarship. I just make up my own religion. I give a fatwa saying kill the Jews.
And they do. And they do. That's exactly what they are doing.
And aren't you validating them? Because you're saying from a liberal perspective, we make it up as we go along. And they, from an extremist perspective, say, let's make it up as we go along. You're almost empowering the very people you claim to be fighting with.
That's a very... I think that's an excellent point. I've heard it before, and I've said it before. That's an excellent point. Good in theory. Wonderful in theory. But again, I live in the world of reality. And the reality is that people like this already exist. And this is why progressive thinkers, and I wish there were more people in positions of religious authority who would take that power and actually democratize the ijtihad, so that young people know that they are worthy of thinking about these issues for themselves, yes, in a nonviolent way, but actually developing that personal relationship with Allah rather than believing that they are here to worship Allah's self-appointed ambassadors.
And just to be very clear before we move on, just for the viewers, you talk about ijtihad. How do you define ijtihad?
Ijtihad is Islam's own tradition of independent thinking, of critical reasoning, of debate, dissent, and reinterpretation. And yes, I have heard 1,000 times that only certain people are allowed to exercise ijtihad. But even that is up for debate.
But if you're trying to win over Muslims and reform the community, when you say things like, we have to own up to, quote, Muslim complicity in the Holocaust.
Yes. Yes, as
Muslim complicity.
As there was
Am
Christian.
I complicit in the Holocaust?
I think that anybody who denies that Muslims played a very important role in the Holocaust,
a Palestinian Mufti, I think, is your example.
More than just a Palestinian
Mufti. What about all the Muslims who died fighting Hitler? What do you do to their memories?
What I do is I write about it in Allah, Liberty and Love. That's what I do.
Agreed. So you disown the statement from your first book that said Muslim complicity?
No, just as I do not disown the notion of Christian complicity in the Holocaust. I'm simply saying that we Muslims,
you break everything down to Muslim.
Muslims have a lot of catching up to do in the dissent department.
You see your role, part of your role is speaking truth to power. When you say I speak truth to power, I also worry that there are people in power, not in the Muslim world, in London, in Washington, D.C., Toronto, Tel Aviv, who you're not speaking truth to. You're telling them what they want to hear. They want to hear that this is a problem with Islam. It's not a problem with our policies. And Irshad Manji is saying, I agree with you.
I have not let anybody off the hook. I am, in fact, distinguishing between politics, culture, and religion.
You refer to it as a Muslim crime. Why is it not a Turkish crime? Why does everything get boiled down? It's almost, again, that you're playing, unwittingly perhaps, the extremist game, because you're defining everything through an Islamic prism.
When something is done in the name of a particular religion or a particular God, that is when I think we can legitimately apply the name of the religion to that crime. The moment people, sincerely believe that the Quran has nothing to do with this violence is the moment when terrorists who commit these crimes in the name of Allah will no longer be able to get away with them. My childhood, as anybody's childhood, will influence how you think, whether you think, and whether you give yourself the permission to think. And so, for example, that episode of my father chasing me through the house with a knife in his hand, incidentally, my father was nominal as a Muslim. He didn't really practice, and I knew that from the get-go. But that one night, I flew out of my bedroom window and crawled up to the very top of the roof, and I surveyed the neighborhood. I remember making a pact with myself and with Allah that I'm going to use education, not just for my own liberation, but also for the betterment of whoever else is around me. This is a young woman's journey to reconcile her faith with the freedom that she has been given in a part of the world in which her own parents did not grow up. And one could say that this is the kind of journey that a whole generation of Muslims is also undergoing right now.
If Islam is what Muslims do, and how Muslims live and the context in which they live, why keep going back to the religion and to the Quran? I mean, do you think that if we edited out all the verses in the Quran which are violent or patriarchal, that there wouldn't be militancy in the Middle East or that domestic violence would end? I mean, don't you think Islam isn't the problem and it isn't the solution? That's what Islamists say. Islam is, in the end, a distraction if you're talking about the politics of the Muslim world today.
I don't think it is a distraction. And going back to Mehdi's point about trying to win hearts and minds, I mean, I remain a Muslim for a very sincere reason, because I love Allah. End of story. The reality, though, is that when you come from within the fold, you can say to fellow Muslims that, look, the Quran itself, we can draw inspiration from it. People need to hear that there are these verses in the Quran, and it is shocking, and I would say very, very sad, that more madrasas are not teaching these aspirational verses to their children in order to have them really understand that as children of God, not slaves of God, as children of God, they have the capacity to make a difference within their faith.
Irshad, you say you stayed a Muslim. You say I remain a Muslim, sincerely.
Yeah.
How would you define that? How would you define it? Just believing in God? But would that not just how is that different to a theist who believes in God without believing in the Quran, the Prophet?
Maybe it's not. And therein again is, one of the things that we have to think about. Why do we need to be so different or so special from other people who believe in one God?
So believing in the prophethood of Muhammad, which is one of the conventional beliefs, you don't think is a criteria for being a Muslim? You don't have to believe in the prophethood of...
I believe in the prophethood of Muhammad.
If you believe that's a
I
criteria.
do believe in the prophet.
But should that be a criteria for being a Muslim as it conventionally is?
I don't think so, because what has happened is that in making that one of the criterion, we have inadvertently, as Muslims, many of us, and I would argue most of us, have put Prophet Muhammad on a pedestal, when he himself reportedly said, I'm just a human being who's been given this special mission from God, but I am a fallible human being. And so I believe that going back to the Quran, rather than also supplementing it with hadiths and the traditions of the Prophet, the Quran itself contains the raw materials for the diversity of thought that we are capable of. We don't need to go any further.
Gentleman with the white cap there to end.
So I just want to ask, is there any basis for just punishment and war in Islam, bearing in mind the Prophet and his companions performed both? And is there any practice in Islam which is not open to choice?
The central tenet of Islam is belief in one universal God. The central sin in Islam, therefore, in my view, is playing God with one another. And beyond that, this is your relationship with your Creator. Do not impose on other people. Do not intimidate other people. Understand that you will have the conversation you need to have on the Day of Judgment with your Creator. And why does it need to be more complicated than that? If you keep it that simple, then I think that part of the contribution one would be making is liberating spirituality from the cage of organized religion. That's it. Khalas.
That's it. Khalas is a nice line that I'm going to steal.
Guys, this woman actually overshadowed the Muslim man, because this was, I think, a discussion between both Muslim, and based on their discussion, I noticed that she's a Muslim, if I'm quite sure, because she kept on saying we, and Also, based on the discussion, she's an author of a book. She loves to write books, so she's an author. So for her to come here to say all of these things, that's to let you know that she has done a lot of research and she's not pleased about so many things you know our religion stand for. She wish they can at least have pity. I think she feels like um Muslims do not care about human life. All they want to do is to follow the Quran, and she's also trying to let us understand that what Quran says is not what some Muslim practice. That they practice it in another dimension. What Quran says this, they try to do it in their own understanding, their own meaning. So she's just trying to let people, Muslims understand that yeah, she's a Muslim, but she has to stand by what is right based on her own opinion. And the Muslim man was trying to, defend what she was saying, like defend his religion, trying to let her understand that what you're saying is totally wrong. But you could see that she actually stood her ground and she totally overshadowed the man. And you could see that the audience and the Muslim man, everything the woman said didn't sit well with them. But let me know your point of view, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.